Police officers of Reddit. What criminal actually impressed you with their criminal skills? We get a call reporting that the phone system of major UK bank has been hacked and that the caller has had several £1,000s stolen from their account as a result. Seems unlikely, but officers went round to see what had happened. Obviously the bank's system was fine, but scammers had done something fairly clever. Turns out that there is a way in the UK of keeping a phone line open when only the recipient hangs up. The scammers called the victim and pretended to be from the bank before asking for account details. Victim was suspicious, so hung up and called the bank back at their real telephone number. However, the scammers held the line open and played a dial tone down the line, so the victim thought that she was making a new call. Then they played a ring sample before a new scammer answered the call and took the details pretending to be the bank. I've heard of it a few times since in the press, but the first time I came across it was on duty and no one had any idea what was going on. Not a police officer attorney, but this one is pretty good. We had a guy who ran one of those we buy your gold places. Typically he did a moderate business, but it just wasn't enough for the lifestyle he wanted. So he decided to rob a better jewelry store. He found one that sold only very high quality jewelry and was about 300 miles away from his house. He visited them one day and got the name of the safe they used, noted the type of alarm, cameras, etc. Then went home and bought the exact same safe. He spent months planning how to break into the safe without possibly tripping the alarm, but he wasn't having any luck. He was dedicated, kept working on it, and finally came up with a plan. He got his brother and another person I can't remember relation, and they turned off their cell phones at home. Then drove to the store. Got there in the middle of the night. They climbed onto the roof, cut a hole in the ceiling and purposefully tripped the alarm. They put the ceiling tiles back and laid down on the roof. The owner came and the police came. The owner checks out the store. Nothing looks wrong. Police haven't seen anyone, so the owner decided his alarm must have malfunctioned. He turns off the alarm because hey, he'll be back here in a couple hours to open. Sends the officer away and he goes home. The thief, able to hear the system is disabled from his hiding spot, then opens hole in the ceiling again. They casual cat drop into the business and basically wipe the place out. Estimates ran around 4 to 6 million in gold. They take all the gold home where he starts to slowly mix it in with his regular business. He melts all the gold down to sell, so it's not like the pieces can be identified. They generate some fake business receipts, but lots of his transactions are cash based and a small business keeping sloppy records is nothing new. Meanwhile, the jewelry store owner feels like a complete idiot, and the cops only find one lone cigarette butt inside. No prints. They must have worn gloves. This police also get a security image from a business outside of a black truck coming and going at the right time. But the license plate is obscured, and the thieves are covered up enough the poor quality camera can't catch much that's helpful. I believe the cigarette came back with a partial match to one of the sidekicks. Now mind you, a partial DNA match is pretty mediocre evidence at best, even though juries love even partial DNA that gets the police looking in the right direction. The eyes has noticed our thief doubled his income that year, and then the next year had a slump, but somehow managed to buy a whole heaping lot of cash that had to be unreported. He bought a Land Rover, some sports car can't remember type, a 400k house, a 30k pool, all with cash that was unaccounted for. A check of cell phone records had one of the cell phones pinging about an hour away from the crime scene in the middle of the night. And the truck he had was the same type of truck that showed up at the scene. Because one of them turned his phone on and called his wife to tell her he was out with said guys, but at a bar. It was a lot of little things, but it was enough altogether to make a pretty decent case and a jury convicted him at trial. Edit. There are some other evidentiary pieces I know I can't remember, but overall he did a surprising amount of planning, but just got too excited with his spending/laundering of gold. That right there is exactly why smoking is a bad habit. Once had a guy who shoplifted on an industrial scale. He stole hundreds and sometimes thousands of pounds worth of merchandise from a particular well-known high street clothing store. Every day, He'd go to different branches all over the country UK obviously. He spoke nicely and was smartly dressed. He just used to fill up bags with high value products and walk out. He had a warehouse type unit somewhere, police never found it with his own till, because he would generate till receipts for these items and go back to return them at a different branch and get cash refunds. He was at it for years, made enough to put his kids through private school. When he got caught he was jailed for about a year. Our shoplifting sentencing guidelines are absurdly low. When he came out he got back on it. Police still couldn't find his base. He was being investigated and was on bail. One occasion when he answered his bail at the police station, the police had a 6-man surveillance team ready to tail him and track down the warehouse he was using. He lost them within 2 minutes of leaving the station. When he came for trial, based on the CCTV evidence we had from the various shops, the case got thrown out. The footage wasn't good enough to make out his features exactly, and the officer who purported to identify him hadn't followed procedures. After he was thus acquitted he was due to be investigated for some other matters, but he gave the police and security the slip from the court before he could be arrested. Even I was impressed, and I was prosecuting him. Dad had the street smarts to get his kids the book smarts. Don't be like daddy, kids. Get a good job and watch out for men like daddy. I love you. That's how the Kennedy family got its wealth and power. I'm a police officer, but the story is actually from my dad, who was a lawyer. He had a couple of guys who had scratch built an ATM. This would have been back in the 80s, before the days of skimmers and cameras to clone cards. So they built their own ATM and installed it in a wall on a public street in order to collect card details to use later on. I don't know if it actually dispensed money. I'm guessing it just showed an error message. He told me that very occasionally he had come across criminals who had worked so hard for their spoils that he felt they had kind of earned them. These guys were his example. He was also confused that 2 people smart enough to do this chose not to make an honest living. In Italy there was always an urban legend of this happening, with a guy behind the fake ATM facade who would take people's cards, read their codes as they put them in, then put their card into the real machine behind him, take out the maximum, and give them back the lower amount that they wanted. They would put the facade up on the weekends, when the banks were closed. I heard the story in the 90s and supposedly it took the banks a while to figure out what was going on. This was kind of the old way of things. Back when skimmers couldn't just be fitted over the regular scanner. But they weren't quite that large. Just big enough to fit over the card reader and another unit that would fit over the pin pad. The best would still let the card use the ATM and the buttons would work on the keypad underneath as well. They could leave them in place a lot longer, usually install them soon after a fill up, and remove them before they got reloaded. I'm not a police officer, but know some guys who are. Best one I heard was a guy who would drill a tiny hole beside a window to open the latch. He would then enter at night and go straight to the front door and open it so he could make a quick exit if needed. If he couldn't open a door, he would leave again immediately. He stole stuff, then closed the window and locked the door behind him. Most people had no idea they had been robbed. He took wallets off bedside desks while people slept beside them. Or sometimes just took some cash and cards, but left the wallet. When he got caught, he was making a plea deal, so it was in his interest to admit all crimes, so he couldn't later be prosecuted again for them. He took police round dozens of houses, and each had a tiny drill hole. And every house owner thought they had lost wallets and credit cards, never knowing they had been burgled. Stupidest one. A kid broke into his school at night and stole 10 laptops. It was snowing that night. Police came when the alarm went off, and there was one set of footprints in the snow that led them from the school the whole way to the kid's front door. Stupidest one. A kid broke into his school at night and stole 10 laptops. It was snowing that night. Police came when the alarm went off, and there was one set of footprints in the snow that led them from the school the whole way to the kid's front door. Would love to see his expression when the police showed up at his door. Oh, hey officer. Nice to meet you. Son, we got an alarm from the school nearby and there are footprints leading out literally to your front door. Got anything to say before we lock you up? Oh, It was my brother. He's a real thief. You mean the baby? When I was a rookie I got a call at 3:00 AM one night about a hold up alarm going off at an ATM. I respond and don't really take the call that seriously at first because I'm thinking, no way a hold up alarm is being triggered at 3 in the morning. I get there and start checking the bank when I see a guy walking through the drive-thru. Stupid me strolls over and calmly says, "Hey man, come over here and talk to me for a minute." He bolts and I take off after him, only to realize I left my handheld in my car. I run back and call it in, and my partner shows up shortly after. Well, we can't find the guy and start looking around. The guy spray painted the ATM camera and he drive-through camera, which set off the alarm. About an hour later I see a vehicle with out-of-state tags driving slowly through the drive-through, and after running the plate, he has fictitious tags. We search the vehicle and can find absolutely nothing but a very long tree branch in the back of the SUV. We write him 4 fictitious tags and send him on his way to my sergeant. The next day my investigator gets a call from the FBI because they had this guy's name flagged and saw where we ran him. He had been hit in ATMs in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas and Tennessee. We were the first department that actually came in contact with him. He would spray paint the cameras or use the tree branch to turn high cameras away. After the alarms go off, he would wait nearby for police to leave. He would then come back and saw the hinges off the ATMs and take the money. He stole approximately $150,000 over a 6-month period. He was caught a few weeks later by a guy I went to the academy with.